programs and things like that, but I mean just in terms of sheer scale.
In terms of sheer mandate and
Yeah.
magnificence, because of, and you, so Lilienthal and Wilkie fought for years in court. Wilkie fought for Commonwealth and Southern. He didn't want to sell it. Remember, this is a business that was growing even in the Depression.
Right.
Like the internet now,
Yeah.
it was business cycle proof, more or less.
Right.
So,
and the utilities also, I mean, they were regulated in some ways, but they were also delivering more juice at lower prices.
they were, the prices were coming down as
Right.
they served more people, and he thought it was insane.
Right.
And he got crazier and crazier with rage when Lilienthal began to build buildings for the towns, or see that the Department of the Interior built buildings for towns and bribe towns to take his power instead of Wendell's power.
Right.
And Wendell realized it was wrong, and he finally spoke out later in the second half of the 30s and said, this isn't right. The government can't have the monopoly in this area,
Right.
and it shouldn't. It will be bad for all of us. And he sold his company, or a good part of it, to the TVA. And everyone wrote, oh, so it's solved. The shareholders
Right.
got some money from the government, but it wasn't solved because
Right.
the element of competition was gone. And this Wendell was very sad. He telegrammed his wife about it, and he went into politics, and that's how we came to know him.
Right.
But he also spoke about the forgotten man in his acceptance speech, and that's one reason I called the book this, because Roosevelt spoke at the beginning,
Right.
Wendell spoke at the end, Wilkie, and he understood that little businessman was important for the future of America.
Right. Now, the TVA in the end was very inefficient.
Well,
Correct.
looking back later,
I mean,
it turned out water power was not the most efficient power.
Right.
And they displaced 15,000 people.
That's
and,
right,
you know, there's another author, Jim Powell, who's written, if you want to have a specific policy question-answer for each book, he's written a wonderful book, and he gets into the 83 inefficiencies of the TVA, not to mention the polluting that it did with its, endorsement of phosphates.
Right.
So
yeah, that was like a huge thing, right?
Phosphates were great because they poured phosphates everywhere, and we still live with that today.
And I mean, the idea now, and it might be a good time to talk about changed assumptions, economic assumptions, is that or most people agree now, even tending on the left, that one thing that's good about decentralized economic activity is that it's a discovery process. So before everybody does one thing one way, you kind of figure out how to innovate and what the damage is of one process versus another, et cetera.
And this is also an argument for American federalism. We must, when the states do something, then you can learn from it. You can learn from.
Right. So it's always better to have a bunch of different flowers blooming, even if it might not make for a perfectly regimented garden, but in the end it's more fecund. What what got you interested in the topic of the Depression? This is something both of my parents grew up in the Depression, and I always, and all of my relatives, and I always felt like the Depression was something that everybody in America understood and had some real connection to. It's clear that isn't the case anymore. It will become less and less with time. What got you interested in the topic, and then what did we most to gain from studying the Depression now, particularly a revisionist understanding of it?
Well, I'll just answer the last one. One thing, the heroism of the people, that's not a right-wing or a left-wing thing. And you see the brave way they persevered, whether they were Roosevelt people or the opposite.
Right.
We can't know what that's like. And in the book, I trace actually Bill W., the founder of AA. He founded the modern self-help group. The idea that you would sit at a table with people who have the same problem as you without a clergyman, basically. And through a network, address your problems successfully. And this is so much with us today, whether it's on the net or anywhere else. We all have a self-help community of some kind, even if it's talking about our bunion on the internet, our runner injury. And he did this, and I trace how he did it. He was also a Wall Streeter. So that was his reaction.
But he was a better drinker than a stockpicker.
He was a poor Wall Streeter, more or less, but he had some interesting ideas. He was an alcoholic, and he came to this solution. I don't think it was an accident that he came to it in the Depression. I also talk about a Harlem cult leader, Father Divine, who taught his own gospel of plenty and got his followers to buy real estate for him mostly, but still, and they expanded in white neighborhoods, and he fought lynching. He wanted anti-lynching law, and he didn't see how Roosevelt could change all these other things about federalism and not deal with lynching, which is a valid point. And he bought real estate across from Roosevelt. So to provoke him. So the first thing is the heroes. The second is that you do not need to mess with the economy for it to recover, and that messing with the economy can retard recovery. You do not need to go into war mode or Katrina mode when there is a downturn. The economy has a lot of inherent strength, and there's plenty of evidence, and economists who knew it at the time, that it would have recovered much sooner, maybe 36, had Roosevelt not asked for the mandate of unimagined power to change everything in
Which he
sight.
did in an inaugural
In the
address.
second inaugural, he said, now we're going to change everything exponentially on steroids.
Unimagined power, which is stunning. I mean, in today's America, I think that wouldn't go over so well. If you to say it openly, that you're president and you want unimagined power.
You can't even hear John Edwards saying it, or Al Gore saying it. So he said that, and it scared them to death. The New Yorker cartoons are accurate of the little businessman, the fat businessman hiding in his salon, waiting for the New Deal to be over.
So, no, but you know, we're also in a kind of post-New Deal consensus. Ronald Reagan ran as a New Deal Democrat, or he used to say, when he ran for president, that he was a New Deal Democrat, that he was a Roosevelt Democrat. Barry Goldwater, I think, was the last Republican candidate to question Social Security. We're clearly living in the kind of, the New Deal might be the text of contemporary American politics, even as we have a much better understanding of the economy and the idea that interventions are usually always have unintended consequences, typically negative consequences. How do we explain this kind of strange amalgam of free market, kind of libertarian economics, which is really won the intellectual battles and many of the policy battles, but government spending,